Hello, everybody. Welcome to the LIUniverse. I'm Dr. Charles Liu, your host. And as Alan knows all too well, I prefer to be called Chuck. Hello. And let us go right to our co-host, Allen Liu. Hi, Alan. How's it going?
Hello. It's going okay.
All right. Anything exciting happening on your end these days?
Well, here's the thing.
Uh-huh.
I always talk about random things exciting happening on my end these days. But
That's
what's
true.
the
It's
exciting
true.
happening on your end these days?
On my end, well, one thing that's very exciting to me right now is that the Rubin Observatory is kicking butt. Okay. As you know, I'm on the Science Advisory Committee for the Vera Rubin Observatory, and its first look images are scheduled to be taken in around the 4th of July. But we have now
That'll be
commissioning
fun.
camera data. Oh, it'll be marvelous. But we already have commissioning camera data that's coming out. And I just want to let you know, without giving away any state secrets or anything, it's amazing. It's utterly amazing. And the observatory itself, I've shown pictures before, right? It literally looks like a starbase out in the universe.
It's awesome, yeah.
It's actually on a mountaintop in Chile.
Yeah.
And I cannot wait for that to happen. So that's the latest thing. I would love everybody to check it out, see what you can learn about the Vera Rubin Observatory and all the neat stuff that's going to be happening in the very near future.
A bit longer of an opening line than I usually use, but
a little bit longer, yes. But just one, this is you put me on the spot. What am I supposed to do?
That's what you do to me all the time.
It is true. And that's a great way, looking toward the future, to introduce our guest today, engineer extraordinaire and futurist, Alexia Stylianou. Hello, Alexia.
Hi, guys. Good to be here.
Hey. I don't use the term futurist lightly, all right? I know people throw around futurist. Oh, this person is thinking about the future. But actually, you are thinking about the future. I mean, not just in the work that you're doing in creating amazing new technology for use right now, but actually thinking about the future of stuff, the kinds of things that engineers are uniquely qualified to do when they're given the freedom to think about things without a constraint of having to put out a product tomorrow, So I really want to hear that about the kinds of things that you do. Okay, so thank you very much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
a lot of my work is sort of at the nexus of wearables and human-machine interaction, and
that's fun stuff.
Anything that would fit into like you mentioned, heavily forward-looking work, like skunkworks kind of energy. I love anything like that.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, well, let's talk briefly about the wearable thing right away, to the extent that you are allowed to talk about, because skunkworks by definition are things you're not supposed to talk about. But wearables, as you know, when we are out in space, when we have our astronauts and folks, they always have stuff attached to them all over the place, right?
Yeah.
Those are a kind of wearable, but they're really just sort of probes. Now, your wearables, are they going to be used in space? Are they the kind that's going to be taking us to the next level? Or is it just some version of, I don't know, the Apple Watch or something that gives us your heartbeat while you're jogging, something like that? I'm sure there's something much fancier than that. So you can tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, listen, sending the wearables I've been working on into space is the dream project. We're certainly not there yet. I am under NDA, but to the extent that I can kind of go into it, the sensors that I work on are part of a wearable biometric platform that's designed to measure human biomechanics to a resolution and degree that is not really accessible to your everyday person. There's sort of this really interesting problem where a lot of PT clinics that are accessible for everyday folks walking in off the street. Physical therapy. They have technology that has been around for around 100 years now. They're using glorified protractors to measure things like joint angles. And then you have really kitted out academic labs with sophisticated optical motion capture systems that are able to give you really detailed information, but everyone doesn't know a biomechanics professor or a grad student that can get them into those kinds of places. So they're meant to kind of bridge the gap between those two extremes.
Awesome.
Cool. Very, very neat. Well, let's get into today's joyfully cool cosmic birthday.
Yep, you got it.
Yeah.
I got it. You got it.
The joyfully cool cosmic thing of today is directly relevant to thinking about the future and thinking about things moving forward. There is a moon mission called Firefly, not the TV show, but Firefly, that actually landed a spacecraft, a lander on the moon called Blue Ghost. And this just happened a few days ago. I'm so excited about this because we have landed things on the moon before.
Yeah.
But this one is really cool because it was launched by a non-governmental entity.
Yes.
It's actually just like random private people, right? Now, Alan, you know all about
I do
this
know
stuff.
a lot about this particular thing.
I want this to be known because it really is the future.
It's
sometimes we
pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It's a pretty awesome thing. So this Firefly is the company. Blue Ghost is the robotic lander that they landed on the moon. This is all part of a NASA program where instead of the past model of new lunar landers and other most of what NASA has done in the past has been a model where NASA designs this mission, sets its teams up, and then contracts out with other companies to design the things for the NASA mission specifically. But around a decade ago, they started doing for missions to the International Space Station a different model where they just give a company a contract for a fixed amount of cost and say, you design everything, you build everything, and we'll just test to make sure it works and then start using it. And that worked so well for getting first cargo and then crew to the International Space Station. So now there's a couple companies that'll do that in each of those different areas, that they decided to expand this to delivering robotic payloads to the moon. So there's actually been quite a lot of lunar landers and lunar landing attempts recently, in large part thanks to a prize by Google that Google set up called the Lunar X Prize, which, because it took too long for the landers to be developed, that prize money ended up being unclaimed. But those companies and teams that were designing these landers have now been competing for these NASA contracts. So Blue Ghost is the first one of those to actually be entirely successful. There was a previous one that landed sideways. We might have mentioned on the podcast or on our shorts earlier. Yeah, it at least got to the surface. That's more than most companies can claim. But that one was sideways. Blue Ghost actually landed right side up. So
that's marvelous.
So it has been the most successful of these landers so far. And what's really cool is there's we're getting different companies, different countries too. There's some Japanese teams that have been landing on the moon. One of those, unfortunately, also landed not right side up, but there's another one that's on its way and might still be able to land right side up. So
as long as it hasn't landed yet,
you could still get there. So yeah, there's been this resurgence of interest in landing stuff on the moon, and it's pretty awesome because it's like the closest large planetary or celestial object. It's got all this great science we can do, all this great geology and things we can find out about the history of the Earth by looking at how the moon, because we think the moon came off of the Earth in a giant impact. There's all these great stuff you can do, and now there's this impetus for these private organizations and private companies to start getting in on that team. And the goal, I guess, eventually is that if NASA does this kind of contract project to kickstart a private industry, then maybe universities or other governments or nonprofits and things might even someday be able to pay for their own moon missions, get their own science done. It would be awesome.
I love that.
So cool.
Yeah. Now, Alexia, you being an engineer and listening to this kind of project happen, I should say to all of you all that Alexia has not one but two engineering degrees from Brown, and is very, very knowledgeable about all kinds of aspects of this thing called creation and fabrication. That style of contracting, where you just give somebody the resources and say, go attack the problem. I mean, that's risky, right? But is that the right way to do things when we're trying to innovate, especially for things like high technology, space, etc.?
Yeah, it's an interesting case. I think ideally, that's how many engineers love to work. I can only speak for myself, but when you're given a long leash, a lot of these projects, restraints aren't always helpful. Financial restraints, a lot of heavy upper management oversight. Like sometimes design and engineering teams just need space to explore and to fail, particularly with like projects that have not necessarily like immediate turnaround, but like far-reaching
right. Yeah, because it
results.
takes quite a lot of years to get a moon lander from a concept to being on the
Exactly.
moon.
Exactly. And if you are demanding like immediate returns, it can curtail like what could end up being an amazing project, but like might need years of investment in R&D.
Yeah.
But I'm biased.
No, your bias is actually what we want to hear, right? Because we don't know necessarily. I mean, I know enough about complex systems to know that I'm not going to be able to launch a successful moon mission just by getting a really big rocket and aiming it at the moon, right?
Yeah,
there's
thousands
of steps, right? That go step by step. I mean, how do you break down something like that? And I know that room to fail is a big one, which we unfortunately in our education system sometimes don't provide room for, right?
Right. And it is kind of, I mean, this also brings to mind, we're in a time where government funding for a lot of these projects is being cut or like at least questioned and looked at.
That is
and that is like part of like what concerns me when I read headlines about that is, there are just certain projects and certain types of research and certain types of problem solving and thinking that don't necessarily fit into like a model that rewards shareholders on like a quarterly basis. And it needs to be funded by sort of like these larger organizations, whether it's state or federal, in order to get done, because it doesn't fit into that box. And so, hopefully a lot of these projects will be allowed to continue, and I'll be keeping an eye on the situation, as I'm sure everyone is.
Yeah. I mean, even before the latest round of government budget things, there was a NASA moon rover called Viper, which was designed to be landed on the moon by one of these commercial companies. And it, because of the way the funding model was, they actually ended up building the rover, but before they could finish testing it, it lost funding. So they've been trying to like shop it around to these companies, like, hey, do any of you guys want a free moon lander or moon rover?
No, that's a great point.
If you want a free moon rover, you just have to test it out yourself and then launch it.
Why not?
So
it does happen. Now, NASA's whole founding philosophy has and all of its sort of discussion when we talk specifically about space, NASA, right? They explore the frontier so that others can follow,
right?
And this is where we're trying to do that. But when you're trying to explore the frontier with a different model, you have to be willing to let that model sometimes come up with less deliverables, right?
Exactly.
Thomas Edison's famous comment where he had failed dozens of times to do a particular process. And they're like, aren't you sad that you failed this many times? And he said something along the lines of, no, actually, I succeeded this many times in figuring out what not to do.
Yeah,
right.
I've found 100 ways not to make a light bulb or whatever the quote is supposedly.
Whatever it was. Yeah, it's a very cool quote.
Although to be fair to Thomas Edison's colleagues, it was really that Thomas Edison's sub engineers found 100 ways not to make a light bulb.
Sure. Yeah, that's another.
Okay.
That's another
blaming them, giving them the credit for finding the ways not to make a light bulb.
No, but that's really true. Yeah, you have somebody at the top of whatever structure you have, right? Being the representative of the whole group, but it's all the different pieces that matter that make it happen. So, give us an example, Alexia, of something that you think is really cool right now on the horizon that we're not even making yet. Things that we're just inventing in our minds, just designing, just thinking about, which, you yourself is as a futurist engineer type person are just thinking about.
Yeah. Like in terms of something that is coming down the pipeline and actively being worked on right now that is like directly relevant to our conversation, I believe that Prada is going to be designing the suits for the Artemis III mission. It's been a while since
like as in the devil wears Prada.
As in the devil, yes. The atelier of the devil themselves is designing, or at least in partnership, the suits for the Artemis III mission, which is slated to happen this year. Last I checked, I
believe it's been moved to next year, unfortunately.
Okay.
So Artemis III going to the moon. So
Artemis 2 is next year, I think. Actually, Artemis 3 is a little bit after that, but it's coming up soon. I'll actually double check that.
So there's a fashion house,
Mm-hmm.
the most famous, perhaps, Italian fashion house.
Yeah.
Actually designing something that's very unfashionable, which is a space.
Well, they could be more fashionable in the future.
Historically.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What's the deal with that, Alexia?
There's a new sheriff in town. Yeah, so it might, like, at first glance seem kind of surprising that they're having this heritage, like, Italian house design, something that's so futuristic, but it actually makes a lot of sense. Like, if you kind of think a little bit more deeply. So Prada has historically been known for incorporating a lot of, like, technical materials into their designs, which is pretty unusual for, like, a couture, house, like, of the West, at least. They've been using nylon a very long time, and this is for, like, prestige garments. And
wow, yeah.
They've had, like, a sport line for quite a long time, and I just, like, I love the like, attention and respect towards, like, the design process and the idea that this very serious, very, like, functional garment can also be beautiful, and that's not considered, like, trivial or, like, superficial. It's, like, sort of dignifying and, like, giving the garment import in a way, and it's, like, showing just, like, attention to detail that really hasn't, like, been done before. So
I love that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think so. First, I did check the dates. So the current schedule is for Artemis II, the first crewed mission that's going to go around the moon from this program, is going to come next year, so 2026, and then Artemis III will be the year after that, 2027.
Okay, Prada's got plenty of time.
They do.
To
I
come
was
up
going to
with
say
really,
they have a bit of time.
Yeah, I bet the dev team is probably really just knowing, like, timelines. So.
Yeah.
But I think that's marvelous that we're using that creativity knit in, hand in glove, quite literally, with this technical requirement that you actually have to survive out in space.
Well, because it's going to be a piece of clothing and spacesuit that is going to be seen by a lot of people, ideally. Like, it's going to be a part of the public image of this Artemis program for as long as history remembers it. So you want to make it good.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's like it could be potentially, like, a very iconic image, or, like, exactly in the public consciousness. So yeah, we'll see what they come up with. I looked at prototypes. Looks great so far. Looks like a spacesuit. It's kind of how you would expect. They're a little bit tight-lipped on the website. I tried to dig into, like, okay, what exactly is the material breakdown here? They don't have a spec sheet, but they're talking about, like, the way the team worked collaboratively, and something that they're trying to change from previous versions is, like, doing even more engineering in terms of, like, avoiding single failure points, which obviously is critically important. I don't have to tell you that.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm just watching the space. It's going to be.
I think that's marvelous. That's great. And if we think about all of our futuristic ideas about what space would be like from the classic science fiction writers of the previous century, clothing was all built in, right? The covers of all the famous science fiction magazines,
with the bubble helmets and
pictures,
everything.
all of that. It shaped our perception of the future for decades and decades.
I mean, of course, the previous moon mission to carry people, the Apollo program, those are iconic images as well.
That's right. Wow. Well, we want to get to a question from the audience, but before that, let's take a brief break. We are here with Alexia Stylianou here on the LIUniverse podcast. And we are back here on the LIUniverse podcast with Alexia Stylianou, who is our guest for this episode and is going to talk to us about envisioning the future. Let's get a question right now from the audience. Alan, go for it.
Yeah, so we're going to start off with a question here from Luis, who is asking, what is needed to create the next amazing space technology that will break all the conventions we have about space travel?
Ooh.
Interesting. There's a couple of directions you could go with this. There's, like, the design process itself, which is, I guess maybe because of my background, is, like, the first thing my mind jumps to, and, like, specifically how to incorporate user-centered design and design research into, like, the conversations that happen even before we build anything.
Let's get into that. You said user-based design. Is that what that is?
There's a lot of, like, synonymous ways to say this. So there's human-centered design, user-centered design. They're a little bit different. There's user experience design.
Yeah.
But basically just like designing in conversation with the intended users or the intended audience.
Yeah. The one thing I've heard about this before, human-centered design, is that when you have doors and they open only in one direction, you want to make it so that the door doesn't look the same in both directions. Because if it does, then you expect it to work the same in both directions. So anytime you pull on a push door, it's not your fault. It's the design.
Right. Designing it just in conversation with the intended user instead of your ideal user or the user that you imagine, without actually like taking the work to have those conversations that like have an actual dialogue.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah.
So, like if you're going to make a button, you have to make sure that that button is something a human can actually push.
Yeah, with their actual thumb. Yeah.
So if I was asked to design a button, I'd have more questions. So I'd say like, who is the button going to be used by? What is the button going to be used for? How long does the button need to last? But focusing more on like who the button is for, I'd be like, okay, can I talk to 10 of the intended users? Can I like ask them about their feelings about buttons? Build some prototypes for that. Like after having that conversation, then you go to the drawing board with them. There's like design with and design for, and a lot of like forward thinking conversations within design right now are talking more about like design with more than design for.
Because I know like astronauts, if you're designing like a space equipment or something like that, would definitely be like a much more specialized audience, right? Like they bring their own skills, they bring their own differences from one astronaut to the next. Like you want to talk to the people. I mean, we know who's going to be launching at Artemis II, so presumably they've been in conversation for a long time.
One would hope,
those 4 particular astronauts.
Yeah, and they're like, I don't know, the whole field of like participatory design thinking is really cool. I went to a design research conference last summer, and like it really like changed my way of thinking about this. But basically, like the design as a discipline has historically had this idealized version of like the one designer, the genius in their room, like coming up with these brilliant ideas that they then like help trickle down to their grateful users. Like that like mode of design just has not like is a fiction, first of all, and like the fiction can often be pretty harmful. So the thinking is more like participatory design allows the eventual users and like community that the design is for to have a voice, and like often the result is much better when you talk to the people who are going to end up using your product, because the subject matter expert on what it's like to wear a spacesuit is the person wearing a spacesuit. So
we did have that conversation with astronaut Katie Coleman, who was a guest on the podcast last season, and actually in our first season too. She mentioned that she had to just say, because of budgetary constraints, that she could be in a suit that was much too big for her.
Wow.
And she just basically had to learn to stuff clothing all around her body so that the spacesuit, she wouldn't be like bouncing around inside the suit.
Yeah.
And that's an example of not what you were talking about is ideal, right?
Yeah, she worked at that because she's incredibly well trained, but like you have to think about like if you're making an astronaut's job that much harder, then like you're getting less of what you want an astronaut to be doing.
Exactly. And I mean there's not like a zero risk associated with that, just like biomechanically, practically, like you want there to be as little friction as possible between like the human and the wearable, right? So it makes you think. I believe the Artemis suits are going to be more size inclusive and like more customizable to the user, so that's
good.
Cool.
That is good.
Thank you, Prada.
I have an interesting thing that I wanted to ask if you knew things about regarding spacesuits, which is I remember seeing a while ago on like a television documentary type thing about spacesuits that use like direct compression instead of like ones that are based on like, so current spacesuits like use atmospheric pressure inside the suit to like keep you from exploding in space, or not exploding, but your blood boiling and everything, bad stuff.
But these ones use direct pressure?
Yeah. So I saw that they were like talking about like using like the compression bands in the suit itself to just like hold your skin together basically, rather than using the pressure of the air, except for like around the helmet. That's
so cool.
Yeah. It looked really cool. I'd be excited to see if how people are working on that. I don't know if it's something that you have any experience with, but it's something that I would like the audience to know exists because it's awesome.
That is awesome. That application in particular, I wasn't aware of. I guess like the thing that it reminds me of is a lot of like exoskeletons.
Oh, cool.
Ooh,
Yeah.
yes. Iron Man. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no. There's a lot of like research into exoskeletons for use in industry, like particularly automotive manufacturing.
Oh.
And that uses like a system of actuators and like utilizes compression to enable people to hold like normally tiring postures for longer and
that's
with like
cool.
far less strain on their body.
That's good.
It just reminded me of that. I don't know if the tech is exactly the same, but
now I'm thinking about the forklifts in the movie Aliens with Sigourney Weaver, which she winds up wearing as an exoskeleton to battle with the evil alien queen, right?
Yeah,
that kind of thing we're talking about. Whew.
I mean, someday.
Yeah, the iteration of this, a decade or two, maybe more.
Yeah. What are you thinking about in the future, Alexia? Things that are like way beyond. I mean, things that aren't just like the products of next year or next decade, but like centuries, millennia. That's really future.
Yeah, that's a great question. Last thing I thought about that was far range. I recently re-listened to one of my favorite episodes of 99% Invisible, which was about nuclear semiotics, and particularly the committee that was convened to discuss the long-term nuclear waste disposal or like protection site in New Mexico.
Yeah. Okay, tell us about this nuclear semiotics. Okay, the word semiotics is like language or something.
I wish I could tell you. I actually don't know.
I can check it out. I'll go search that etymology.
Thank you, Alan. Yes, but tell us about this. Yes.
Yeah. So basically, it's a highly interdisciplinary field that's focused on like this particular application is how do we communicate to future societies the danger of radioactive material. And the time horizon, like as people who work in foresight or futures would say, the time horizon for this problem is extreme. We're talking like hundreds of thousands of years. There's some material at the WIP center that's going to be radioactive for about 250,000 years. And so we have this problem of like, as human society changes, how do we keep the warning symbols or warning messages updated to keep pace with the change of human society? So it's a great podcast episode. I recommend it. I think it's called 10,000 Years. Because 10,000 years is the time horizon for the committee that was convened to solve this problem. Basically, like, NASA said, we know that 250,000 years is like a crazy amount of time. We just need you to communicate this for 10,000 years.
Jeez.
And then they can worry about it after.
Well, if you think 10,000 years ago, right, we're looking at cave paintings.
Right. Yeah.
We're
like
only
the first
guessing.
big structures in like places like Turkey where they have those ancient like Stonehenge type things.
We're wondering what they're trying to tell us or what they're trying to say. So you're saying we have to find a way to tell people explicitly, don't come in here or you'll come out glowing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or you won't come out, really.
Right.
So what came out of that?
Well, it's pretty interesting. A lot of ideas are bandied around and then explored and then ultimately turned down. They had conversations about, okay, well, what language can we use? But the languages that we use are constantly changing and words, lose their meaning. You have different meanings. So that was struck. We have, symbols. So I think the example given was the poison symbol, which is a skull and crossbones. But even that, the meaning of that has changed over time. It started as actually like something that was visible in medieval art, particularly religious art, as like a symbol of like, the resurrection in Christianity.
Whoa.
Yeah, and then it's also known for being on pirate flags, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. Jolly Roger, So that symbols mean different things to different people.
Right. Yeah, there was a comment I thought about this, which is that if one of the worries with the poison sign is that people think that's like, oh, maybe it's where the pirates buried their treasure at the poison sign. So then like heavy metal bands are using their radioactive symbol sign, right? So
oh yes, that's right.
So maybe then the future people will be like, oh, this is where the heavy metal bands buried their treasure.
Totally. Yeah,
I don't know what Metallica treasure counts as, right? You got Guns N' Roses. This is where our guns and our roses are buried. Okay, never mind. Mind.
They dig up an old band tee and they're like, "This must have been a powerful religion." So I wonder what their theology was like.
Yeah.
So what are they gonna do? What are they gonna do?
Yeah, I mean, eventually they settled on a plaque with messages that were translated into many different symbols in many different languages, and the quote unquote universal symbol of like a person looking horrified, because like you had mentioned, stick figure iconography is something that has maintained a lot of consistency since the cave painting eras. So riffing off of that, that's what ended up on the plaque. But there were a lot of really cool ideas that got rejected too, like the idea of hostile architecture. So there was this like landscape artist that basically said, we don't actually need to communicate exactly what is here. We just need to make people so uncomfortable in this environment that they will not want to be here.
Make it like ugly and painful. Like, this is not worth it.
Make it like sinister, make it foreboding, like try to trigger people's instinctual discomfort in a way that transcends like language or written communication.
Wow.
Amazing. I love that idea. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Speaking of like the languages and everything, I did look up what the semiotic, it comes from the Greek word for signs, like signs from heavens or like signs that used to communicate baseball stuff.
Signs everywhere. Signs. Okay. Yeah. I love that. Do this, don't do that. Can't you read the signs? This is a perfect time for another question before I launch into another 60s or 70s song. Okay.
All right.
All right. Alan, give us another question for Alexia.
Yeah. So this question comes from Joanna or Johanna, potentially. I have to figure out how that's pronounced at some point.
Okay.
But this question is, will AI destroy creativity? Talking about future things and meaning.
Combining the future present and the future. Oh, Alexia, I would love to hear what you think about that.
I think it depends. I mean, I think human creativity is something that cannot be stifled inherently, but will it be a crutch for certain people in certain situations if it's not handled appropriately? Like, certainly. I know a lot of the really interesting conversations about this are occurring in the education field. And there was this really interesting article I was reading about an educator talking about there's a lot of fear around this, and there's a lot of fear around, students using AI to complete their homework. And it's something that educators and parents are concerned about, which is totally understandable. But this lifelong educator and writer was basically making the argument that one way to address this is just structure in assignments such that they are exciting and engaging enough that students will feel like they're missing out if they use AI to complete them or entirely rely on AI to complete them. And he was talking about how formats like the 5-paragraph essay, maybe they do need to die. Maybe
fair.
They're like hampering creativity, and the reason that students are trying to opt out of them or find ways around them is because they are too stifling. And maybe if we allowed a little bit more of the freedom of expression and format, people would feel like it was worth investing time to originate ideas.
Sounds good. And then we wind up with the idea where assessing your assignment isn't about whether you got this right or wrong or the multiple choice letter, but how much creativity did you put in, right?
Exactly.
How much new stuff did you actually create?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm reminded as coming from a math background that like calculators sort of had the same issue. People talked about, the calculator wars or the semi-related math wars a few decades ago. And the idea that like, if there's a machine that can solve the problem for you, if you know how to use it, then the question is like, we have to teach kids to like be able to use calculators. We want to teach them to understand if the answers the calculators are spitting out actually make any sense whatsoever. They want to be able to teach them when you want to use a calculator, when you don't, things like that. So you build your lessons in a situation where this tool becomes part of the lesson, and you learn how and when to use it. And if you want not to use it, or if there's a good reason not to use it, then you also want to still have those basic skills. So maybe, when I talk to people who are in education or who know about educational theory and background, there's a lot of that coming up. Like, maybe AI is just humanity's version of the calculator.
Oh, yeah.
Totally.
The humanities version of the calculator?
That's
supposed to humanities version of the calculator.
It kind of is that also, but
yeah. Well, Alexia, what do you think? Is that a reasonable way of assessing what AI actually is?
I think in this specific context, totally. Like, I couldn't agree more, Alan. I think the worst thing we could be doing is like burying our heads in the sand and pretending that this isn't happening, because it is happening. And teens are going to find a way to get around any internet firewall that you put up.
100%.
They're going to find a way to access these tools. So
I remember when I was in high school, the trick was to use secure HTTP instead of unsecure HTTP, because it had a slightly different URL.
But it was still stimulating your creativity to try to find ways around these rules.
I didn't use it to cheat on any tests. I'm gonna
sure.
But to play math games when it was computer lab time, maybe.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely.
I believe you, Alan. I believe you.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So, we're talking about creativity, and Alexia, as a person who is combining technology with this sort of futuristic ideas and so forth, what are the things that stimulated your creativity? Are things that really made you want to think about the future? Whether it's books, TV shows, what? I mean...
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of science fiction and speculative fiction. So yeah, that's a big source. Maybe an obvious one.
Well, yeah. For those of you who are just on the audio, the reason it would be an obvious one is because over Alexia's left shoulder is a stack of amazing books, which I think this is the time to talk about them. All those of you who want to see this stuff, please go onto YouTube and take a look at the video version of this episode. That is an impressive stack. And might I say, it is well designed as a stack. It's got color, it's got structure. That's a pretty amazing thing. Yeah. So yeah, pick one of those books maybe, or set of books that you think was an inspirational thing for you. And let's talk about that a little bit.
Yes. Gideon the Ninth. So this is about space necromancers.
Oh, that's fun.
Tell us. Okay,
very
Gideon
cool.
the Ninth. Okay, as opposed to like Septimus Prime, as opposed to Harry Potter, as opposed to all those other numbered things.
Yes.
Okay, what's the story?
This is about where do I even begin? So it's in a speculative future or past, depends on how you orient yourself in time.
Okay.
Where Earth is no longer inhabited, or it's not explained why. And the individual who was able to create immortal beings or resurrect people from the dead becomes a god, and that is the god of this universe. And all planets that are in our solar system are still extant. And the story starts on, it's not explicitly stated, but it's Pluto. And
the ninth one.
Yes, exactly.
Formerly ninth one. Sorry.
Right. R.I.P.
It's still there. We still love it.
It's true.
Exactly. It begins with a person named Gideon who lives on the ninth planet, has a difficult upbringing, and the planet is ruled by a necromancer, and they are both teens. And this pair are called out to the ruins of formerly Earth by God to see who is going to ascend into the god of this universe's special army.
That's crazy.
Whoa.
That feels very
Okay, so
sci-fi fantasy mix.
that is amazing. I mean, just even think and create that kind of idea where a god is, for example, not actually unknowable, but it's actually known and
Yes.
understood.
Right.
And then you get the chance to become what is essentially like an angel, right?
Right.
Or a demon or something.
Exactly.
And in order to do that, you have to travel through space that we know to Earth that we don't know anymore because it's gone or it is never yet to be or something like that. That's some
Exactly, yeah.
serious speculation.
There's everything. There's cutthroat politics. There is sword play. There is, you know, God, who is a guy named John. There's religious history. There's everything. There's space travel.
Wow.
Chock full of good stuff.
So that kind of seriously huge conversation, construction and stuff. You're talking about how science fiction and speculative fiction and so forth are bringing you to the place where you are creating new things. How does it work? How does it work in your head? How do you bring that out? Give us an example if you have one.
Yeah. Another manifestation of speculative design that really interests me is artifacts from the future. And that's like a subfield of futurism where someone might create something physical in space that is supposed to be like an experiential artifact from a hypothetical future.
Wow.
So like a really cool example is there's like a team of futurists that designed a speculative experiential future in which they worked with scent and olfactory designers to design a room that smelled like the pollution of the future. And they did a really extensive story building and world building around this future based on signals from the present that they extended over like a pre-designated timeline, and visitors or people wanting to experience this installation would walk into it and be able to smell and hear the sounds of this future city.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. VR smell-o-vision.
Yeah, it's very cool.
And that's not even the future. That's actually exists today. That's the
exists
kind of
today
thing we're
about
talking
the future.
About the future.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
I think
amazing.
that very tangible way to engage your senses in a hypothetical future tends to be very affecting for people. So I that part of it really appeals to me.
I'm reminded of
that.
something I saw a very long time ago now, which was trying to create culinary dishes that would use ingredients that are not popular now but might become more important in the future.
Wow.
Totally. I think I heard about this project or something similar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, with the environmental changes and things like that. You'll change which sea species we might eat, or we might be growing algae more or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that ties a lot into the rise of insects as a form of alternative protein.
Yeah. Right. Because a lot of places in the world, they just eat insects just already, in large numbers.
Totally normal.
But in, the US or places like that, it's not as common for sure.
Exactly.
Anymore. In the past, it probably was.
Well,
True.
Might be again in the future.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we are running out of time. I wish we had more. But Alexia, I want you to take the floor and tell us one cool thing about what you're doing now, about the future, about something you want us all to think about as we head off.
It's not something that my work directly is correlated to, but something that I'm really excited about and paying attention to right now is the development of alternative eco-friendly textiles. So something that I'm watching really closely is things like the development of mushroom leather made out of
cool.
live culture of mycelium.
What?
That's fun.
Super cool stuff.
Little
really, really
bits of
interesting.
mushrooms. Yeah.
Wow. We should be wearing funguses. So there will be funguses among us. Okay.
Yeah. It's really cool that this is going to become an option that's more available, because right now people trying to make ethical choices about leather goods either have the choice of conventional leather, which is often not made in very sustainable or ethical ways, versus polyurethane leather, which is not biodegradable and also not great for the world. So things that on the come up right now. Mycelium leather, leather made of apple waste.
That's fun.
They're hitting the market now. It's awesome. We're gonna have so many more
Wow.
choices, and that's a good thing.
That is a good thing.
So that means we will all be fun guys. Is that right?
There you go.
Sorry,
I'd say so.
it's not actually my joke, but I just thought it would be worth showing. Wow, that's neat. When you work on that, and someday I imagine you'll find some time, tell us more. Okay, that looks really, really interesting. I myself would love to do that. If it were like cost effective, I would totally wear a fungus based shirt.
It just seems fun, or belt or
You and me
something.
both.
Yes, you gotta. But the fun, right? It's puts the fun in fungus. Oh, we already know how to market this thing now. This is too good.
All right, I'm sure someone has had that idea before.
All right,
but we can try and see.
All right, yes.
LIUniverse
Alexia...
brand leather.
Alexia Stylianou, thank you for sharing your insights with us today. We really, really appreciate it. If there's any way we can follow what you're doing, catching up on your ideas and the things you're doing, how can we find you on the internet? Unless you don't want to be found.
Maybe this is what actually finally prompts me to make a website, which I've been needing to do forever.
Good.
So TBD on that, but I am on LinkedIn. I'm not super active, but I always respond to messages, and I try to post once in a while about
all right,
what's going on. So
all right,
yeah,
wonderful. All right, and when there are things that come along that you are allowed to tell us, we cannot wait to hear it.
Yeah,
excellent.
Okay, wonderful. Alexia Stylianou, thank you again for being on this episode. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome. I appreciate the opportunity.
Sure. Allen Liu, co-host, as always, thank you so much for everything.
Yeah, always glad to be here. Glad to make the show happen.
And for all of you out in the audience, thank you for being with us today. We really appreciate it. If you like what you see and hear, please support us on Patreon. And as always, thank you for being a part of the LIUniverse.